I've never shared this with anybody publicly. There's so many things happening in this conversation right now. 1,000 years from now, people are going to be looking at this podcast saying, so this was the breakthrough.
If this was Sports Center, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
Yeah, this is my third bottle. So I misunderstood the instructions and the premise of the podcast interview.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? Got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I've been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table, we're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thank you for the hospitality that this particular podcast provides folks like myself, and I know others, to be curious around their faith practices.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where today we're diving into the wine world. I get to spend time with Chad Preston today, and I'm going to introduce Chad for you. Chad and his wife, Monica, are from Mesa, Arizona. They're the founders of Birds and Barrels Vineyards. Chad started hobby winemaking while in college after he was discharged out of the military after the first Gulf War. He made all of the wine for his wedding 20 years ago, which is that's quite the flex there. Chad and Monica moved to Wilcox in 2015, where they planted their first 3,000 vines in the spring of 16, with their first vintage being in 2018. And currently, they have 14,000 vines in the ground, 8 reds, and 4 white wine varieties. They're also partners in Cochise Wine Company, where Chad and Desiree Girth are the head winemakers. There they do custom crush for 11 other vineyard wineries, and they support the Arizona wine industry by not just making other people's wines, but also by coordinating wine grape purchases, assisting with licensing, branding, marketing, and crafting tasting menus. Chad, it sounds like you do a little bit of everything. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we try to really help out people around us, and the idea is really to support the Arizona wine, the whole Arizona wine business.
Well, you are on the ground making it happen. Anything else we need to know about you that I didn't cover in the intro bio?
Well, I am a born again Christian.
Okay.
You and I have known each other obviously for a lot of years, and I don't know if this is something that you were planning on us to share. Is that you did youth ministry, and I did children's ministry alongside each other in Mesa, and that's kind of how we've known each other, and that has kind of continued since then here in Wilcox. So yeah, we will get into that. For those who are listening to the podcast and you can't see, I am supporting. Chad just sent me his brand new shirt that says "Jesus drank wine" with inside of the Arizona state, and that's a pretty rad shirt. I'm just gonna have to say it's very on brand with Communion Wine Co. So well done. I'm happy to support you guys and rock this. Also, for those who are listening, Chad has one of the most epic beards you will ever see, and it's a thing of beauty. So even if you just go online and check out some YouTube or social media clips just to see Chad's beard, you need to do that. Now, Chad, I want to say before we get into what we're drinking today, you have a unique claim to fame in my book, and I don't think I've told you this. I might have, but I wanted to tell you and put it on the record for all the listeners. You have made, in my opinion,
the single greatest wine to pair with a cigar. Have I told you?
Oh, really? Okay. No,
Yeah.
I have not heard this.
So I'm a big cigar fan. And one of the things, if you're a cigar lover, you know that a lot of wines just get swallowed up by a cigar. And, you know, you're enjoying a good cigar, and all of a sudden that wine's just like, it's flabby, can't keep up. And so that's why a lot of guys, they go to like a whiskey, you know, with a cigar. But you have a wine you make called SBR, Super Bold Red, that I am just telling you is a thing of beauty to pair with a cigar. Have you had that with a cigar?
I actually just had it this weekend in our hot tub with a cigar. Yes.
Yes.
It was a nice Maduro. Yes, absolutely. I love it.
Yes. Okay. So that's I'm just gonna put it out there. If you're a cigar fan watching and listening to this, and you've always thought, yeah, wine can't keep up, Chad makes an SBR that is a thing of beauty. You need to go check it out. That's your claim to fame in my book. So now,
well, thank you. Thank you.
Now it's on the record for everyone to know. All right. That means it is time for us to talk about what we're drinking today. Now, today I have a 2017 Noviolo from Brava. This is a Bordeaux style red wine blend from Washington. About half of this blend is Cabernet Sauvignon. The rest is split equal parts Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. And I tapped into this a little bit right before I got in the episode. And what I have noticed about this one is the fruit notes in it are very subtle. I'm getting a ton of what are traditionally considered tertiary notes, which if you're like, what does that mean? These are some of the fun wine flavors that, you know, people talk about, and you may go, you got that out of a wine. So here's what I got. I got tobacco, mushroom, and leather are the three flavors.
Oh, wow.
And you may be listening to this going, that sounds awful. Like, why would you want to drink that? But if you are enjoying a wine that is balanced well and is aged properly, those are really nice flavors to get. So that's what I'm getting. Chad, what are you drinking today?
I'm actually drinking an Arizona Strive Alianico, which is a 2020 vintage. And this is a new grape varietal to the area here in the Wilcox AVA. The first grower was actually Jim Graham at Golden Rule Vineyards. And, you know, not all grapes grow well in all areas. You have to match your grape varietal up with your terroir and your soil and your weather patterns. And when Jim first started growing grapes, and he really knew nothing about them, somebody had recommended that he plant Zinfandel. Well, I love a good Zinfandel, but Zinfandel does not grow really well in Arizona. It's tertiary white ripening, which means on a cluster of grapes, you'll have a ripe, an underripe, and an overripe berry. And so what happens is during the monsoons, that overripe berry will typically split or get bird damage, and then that whole cluster will start to rot. So what he decided to do, and I assisted him with this in 2018, that's why I'm kind of geeked up about this wine, is we cut off all the cordons on the Zinfandel and we grafted Alianico buds on the Zinfandel vines, right? And so 2019 was the first vintage, and then 2020, 2021, 2022. But it seems like it's a grape that's well suited for at least the Wilcox AVA, and it's really well known and popular in the Texas wine country. Okay. So it's a really well balanced wine. Typically, it takes a couple, 2 or 3 years to really figure out a grape and what it wants during the fermentation process. You know, whether, you know, how balanced it is, what the acidity is like, what kind of yeast it likes. We like to use lab grown yeasts that are cultured for that specific style of wine. And it was pretty much just a home run out of the box. Desiree and I were both given about 1,000 pounds just to fiddle around with the first year. And it turned out so well with so little work. It's like, oh my gosh, this really, it seems like it's well suited for the area. You know, it's a medium to full bodied red wine. it's very, very well balanced with acid and tannin and fruit forwardness. It's structured really well, but it's not overpowering in any of the areas. And you just really get a sense of terroir and place when you do drink it. So,
well, to that we say cheers.
Cheers.
Well done. That was that. I'm intrigued. I want to try that, which is always the mark of a good explanation. You're like, pour me a glass. So, Chad, you did not spend your entire life in wine. You're not like, second, third generation. This is all you know. You got into this, as I mentioned earlier, kind of in a hobby. When did that begin for you? When did you first get interested in wine?
Well, it really started right after I got out of the military. I went back to college on my GI Bill. I was studying religious studies, sociology, and doing biblical Hebrew as my foreign language. And my family comes from a farming background in Iowa. Not that I ever farmed in Iowa, but my mother was the daughter of a farmer, and they would never buy anything if they could make it. So I started asking her about wine. Has she ever made wine? And she's like, "Oh yeah, wine's easy to make." I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Oh yeah, the trick is to make good wine consistently." And so I started fiddling around with it in college, and then sitting down and with some of my colleagues, doing Hebrew homework, we would have these wine dinner parties where it's like, "Oh, this is the new wine that I just made." And sometimes it turned out and sometimes it didn't, but it was just kind of a fun thing that I started experimenting with. And I'm not a dabbler. I'm either all in or all out of something. So it was that point kind of all in.
So did you, as you were progressing, and obviously you are at a place now where you are on the front lines of the Arizona wine scene. Did you have a mentor? Did you have someone who coached you? How did you get from, I'm a hobbyist who's tinkering with this to, like you said, I'm all in?
Right. I think we all have mentors. Specifically the wine mentor stuff. We're always learning. And that's kind of why, we surround ourselves with people that are smarter, more talented than we are, that we just want to soak it all up. I mean, whether it's the financial part of your life or your spiritual walk or whatever it is, we should be looking to other people as role models and for people to show us how to do it better. And so all throughout this walk, I've been looking at, people like Jim Graham for viticulture and Rod Keeling. And of course, Mark Jorvey at Zapara. And then when we first moved down, it wasn't that we knew. Well, obviously, you think you know something until you figure out, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn, and it's absolutely overwhelming. And so, luckily, I was kind of introduced into this community that people were very open and forthcoming with information. And hey, how do you do this? And what would you recommend? And if you could do something over, what would you do? And it's the same thing in wine. We're really about experimentation, and you can't be afraid to fail. That's that. When people come in and they say, "Oh my gosh, all your wines are great," and I go, "Thank you," but you don't taste the flaws. You don't taste the failures. You only taste the stuff that really turned out. Those other things just kind of disappear. And we learn from our mistakes, but you can't be afraid to make mistakes. And so even like Desiree Girth for Strive, her and I are co-winemakers at Cochise Wine Company. We bring our strengths and weaknesses to the table. And luckily they balance out. And her wine style is a lot different than I am that mine is. And then we make wine for, 10, 11 other clients. And then we can incorporate both of our styles and then really listen to what other people are looking at and what they think they want in their style and really support and encourage each other and collaborate so we can make something very unique for each one of our clients.
Now, you see you today and you think, this guy's got it figured out. This looks easy. We don't see your failures. We don't see all the things that you try that don't work. We see the final product. We get to enjoy it, and you guys make incredible wine. But your story is, I mean, in the wine world especially, is a very young story. I mean, we're talking, this was 8 years ago that you made the move and really decided to go all in the way you're doing it. And you're, I mean, not that far removed from this. What did you feel like when you decided, let's make this move, let's go all in? I mean, was it adrenaline? Was it an excitement mixed with a fear? Was it like hopeful optimism? Like what is that journey like to pursue something that you have no idea, big picture, how it's going to play out?
Right. Well, first and foremost, my identity isn't in winemaking. My identity is Christ and following his path. And so, it's one of those, and I'm sure you've heard it before, where it's like, it's almost like Peter stepping out of the boat. It was the willingness to do something. My wife and I used to we had a policy, and we should still have it, but it seems like it gets diluted a little bit. But we would have date nights. And if we missed too many date nights, we do weekends away. And the weekends away we started exploring Arizona wine country. And the only reason we knew about this area down here in Southeast Arizona is because our small group took a camping trip. And it was in like July. And, the small group said, hey, let's go on a camping trip. We'll take all the kids. And I said, that would be great. I know this place in northern Arizona. It's perfect. And one of our good friends said, oh, no, you need to go to Southeast Arizona. And I looked at him. I'm like, hey, man, you're going the wrong way. It gets hotter down there. And it's wildcat country. So we can't go down there being a guy from ASU, right? So we're like, okay, we caved in. We're like, okay, we're going to do this. And it was just magical. It was high prairie. It wasn't cactus. And so we started falling in love with the area. And so if we missed too many date nights, we'd do a weekend away. And that's when we kind of started exploring southern Arizona. And my wife is originally from Kansas. And so she's like, oh, my gosh, this really kind of looks like Kansas. And I went, yeah, I guess it kind of does, the prairie and everything. And then the elevation was 4,000 to 5,000 feet. And we got to this point where, we were assessing our careers and living in the city. And we lived a good, comfortable life. And our 3 adult kids were out of the house. And then our youngest son was going into 4th grade. And we're like, you know what? If God opens the door, we'd be willing to make a change. We would be willing to do that. And so as fate would have it, I said, okay, fine. If God has this in his plans, I would be willing to submit to them. But, my gosh, that would be quite a feat. And I even, one of her friends said, Monica thinks that she's going to be moving down there in 6 months. And I went, oh my gosh, that is so pie in the sky. I mean, this would take a complete act of God. Well, God just kind of said, oh, really? And looked at that as a challenge. And so it was quite literally, we didn't have to push. And that's, obviously God knows us better than we know ourselves, because, I'm the kind of guy that, if I want something, whether it's God's will or not, I'm like blowing down doors. I'll knock doors down. I'll pick the locks. I'll go around above. And this was none of it. Just every door opened one right after another. And it was almost just trying to keep on our feet. And even financially, it was like, hey, this was after the recession and housing prices hadn't really bounced back. And I'm like, she was looking at these places. I'm like, we could never afford that right now. And she's like, if it's God's will, honey, don't doubt God. And sure as heck, one thing right after another. And just, I was like, okay, God, the hands are off the wheel. You got this thing. So that's just kind of how it started.
And look at you now. You're riding that wave, and it seems to be a wild ride. For those of us that don't know, what's the best part of running a winery?
Well, there's not a lot of things glamorous about running a winery. I say the only thing glamorous about wine is drinking it. If I was going to say, I wouldn't even use the word glamorous, because I think about 85% of what we do is actually like cleaning. We're cleaning drains. We're cleaning barrels. We're using pressure washers and everything to keep everything sanitary and sterile. But I love the creative aspect of it. Quite literally, it's, if you think of a winery as a kitchen, and you have you could do make wine in all these different styles. Pinot Noir doesn't have to be made this way. It can be made in all these different styles. And then you have, let's just say 20 different wine varietals to play around with. And they're like spices in a spice rack. So you can do co-fermentations and rosés and sparkling and all these different things. And even, co-ferments between white and reds, blending trials. A lot of people think it's like you have this barrel of Cabernet Sauvignon and, you taste it after 18 months and that tastes pretty good. We should bottle it up. We go through like double blind blending trials on everything that we make, because we feel that if it's good, it can be better, and we're giving, creative bandwidth that we can add a little of something to, like, for instance, the Cabernet Sauvignon, like if it's got good front palate, it's got kind of a flat mid palate, or we call it a donut with good finish. We have a percentage that we can work with to add a little bit to that mid palate to try to make a more balanced wine. And so we're very fortunate to have the ability to do that with all the wines that we have available.
Well, you obviously get to drink a lot of wine as a winemaker. So, that is a glamorous part. You said drinking wine's the best. You get that part. What's the most challenging part? You talk about cleaning being obviously not, as glamorous. What's just really hard about what you do?
Well, during the growing season, like for instance, right now we're balancing 11 different clients, our own vineyards. So we're trying to take care of the viticulture in our own vineyards. A lot of clients like us have multiple varietals growing at one time. So we have 12 varietals in our vineyard. They're all coming in at different times. So we have, 11, let's just say 11 clients. I have 11 or 12 varietals. They all come in at different times. You're trying to balance harvest times, getting, taking bricks and pH samples of everything. And then things just aren't always convenient. You might have, nothing coming in, for 3 days, and then 10 or 14 tons coming in. And then, we had a day last week. I call it a night, but it was a 7 a.m. until midnight, because there's some varietals like Pinot Grigio that is kind of like the half brother to Pinot Noir, that it's genetically unstable. So it can flip flop between gris, which is gray, which you make a white wine out of, to red. If you leave it on skins too long, it comes out looking more rose-ish, like a rosé. So there's times that it's like, hey, we're not going to know what is coming in until it comes in and how much, and it might have to burn the midnight oil. So a lot of it is just time and labor and being flexible and taking things as they come and saying, hey, Lord's got this. We're going to do the best we can, but we can't just let it sit in a bin and not do anything with it right now. We have to process it right away.
Well, you made the comparison to farming, and that's obviously, farmers are at the mercy of the sun and the weather and the rain. And, is this a good year? Is this a hard year? You are, the more I've spent in the wine industry, the more I've realized you are so at the mercy every single year compared to what you're trying to do based on what the weather does, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we say this all the time, that wine is really history in a bottle. And we can look through, I can recount all the vintages we made and went, oh, this one was great. It was a dry year. We got rain after harvest or before harvest. Oh my gosh, this was tough. Last year we had like 24 inches in the vineyard. We had 6 weeks. We couldn't get a tractor in the field. And I think I told you the story. As soon as we could, I told my son, Ethan, get out there. Let's get on the tractor and get stuff done. And he got to the end of one row and called me and like, hey, bring the tow rope. I'm stuck. And then you're, even disease pressure and rot pressure, trying to get things sprayed. And we try to do things as organically as we possibly can, but you still, there's so many things out of our control. It is truly farming. And there's a reason why, farmers are so tight with the Lord, because they're always like, come on, just let my crops grow and let me get them out of the field,
Yeah. I imagine your prayer life is pretty active.
It is pretty active. Yes.
So as you look, and I would be curious for your answer to this, both in Arizona and broader. Where do you see the wine industry going? What kind of trends are you seeing? Anything shifting, anything different? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, I think Arizona wine is on the same trajectory as, someplace like Temecula was 20 years ago, or Texas. We are at its infancy stages here, not just in Wilcox, but Arizona in general. We're really, and that's why everything that we're doing down here is just the Wild West. As long as it grows well, it tastes good, it has your varietal characteristics of that wine, it's like the sky's the limit. And we consult. I mean, we're such a tight-knit community that even I had the idea of growing Pinotage. I was just like, well, it's similar climate to South Africa, so I'd call Kent Callaghan at Callaghan Vineyards, and he's been around a long time, and he's kind of a I'd call him a mentor of mine, whether he knows that or not, just because I like the way he works. I like the style of wine that he does. And he said, well, Pinot Noir or Pinotage is a cross between Pinot Noir and Cinsault. Pinot Noir is thin-skinned grape, but you know what? You're not going to know until you try. So he would never discourage trying something new, but he'd always preface it by saying, I don't know, but try it. These might be some of the things that you might have to deal with. And my gosh, it works out great. And it's a great seller. So really the sky's the limit, just like the Aglianico that I'm drinking today. Jim Graham's the first one that planted it. He thought it might work, but you just have to take the risk and try it, because you're not going to know until you try.
Now, when you say try it, that means I'm going to plant something, I'm going to cultivate it. You're talking what, a few years to try it? How long does that take?
Oh yes, I have personal experience on this one. So I planted Montepulciano, which is an Italian varietal that another grower in Sonora planted, and I love the wine. And I worked on that grape for over 5 years. It grew well. It had great, trunk growth, cordon growth, spurs, canopy, but it would not set fruit. I mean, this is 5 years. And so after some point you have to say, and this is bringing in, viticulturists from U of A and around to do, and they're doing petiole samples and soil comparisons, and everything the fruit should set, it should be fine. And after a while, I just said, this 500 vines is a real expensive hobby. And so that's where this spring I went, okay, we're pulling the Monty out, we're putting Merlot in. And so we learn from our mistakes. And there's so many, it could have been the clone. It was on own root. It could have been the soil. I mean, there's so many things that it could have been, but we're just not going to know. It even could have been viticulture technique. I do bilateral cordon vertical shoot positioning system, which is a single trunk, a cordon, which is an arm, and then spurs that grow 2 buds. It might have been, looking in hindsight, hey, maybe this should have been cane pruned or spur pruned. So if you go to France, you know what a cane pruned is. But again, you can't. You can only do what you can do. You can't. There's a reason why God put eyes in the front of your head, not behind, and then you just move forward. So it just wasn't meant to be. So yes, it's a little expensive.
I mean, I'm thinking like emotionally going 5 years, pouring yourself, trying it, wanting it to work so badly, and then getting to the point where you say, pull it. Like, oh, that has to be a rough day.
Oh yes, there's a few tears, Chad, when we were pulling those out. But again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So, every year it looked like it set fruit, and it would set fruit, and then for whatever reason, we would have this spontaneous berry abortion, and berries would start falling off. I mean, in the infancy stages where they're just small green berries. And so at that point, it just wasn't worth pursuing. It was like, okay, well, I've tried my best, and this is one of those, and it's not about the destination, but it's about the journey. And this journey said, this is not going to work. So let's move on.
This journey hurt.
Yes, it was. I call it character building.
Yes. I think that's what's so impressive about winemakers is the absolute dedication to the craft and an acknowledgement of this may not work. And especially when you're on the front end of something like you guys are, you know, you go to other places where it's like this grape has been grown here for generations. That's not the case in Arizona. It's like we're figuring out what grows really well here. And sometimes you have really happy coincidences or accidents of like, wow, that was way better. And then you have a 5-year learning experience, which
right. Yeah. And luckily, I mean, I feel so blessed that we had mentors that came before us. Like I said, Kent Callaghan, Eric Glomsky, Sam Pillsbury, these guys that were growing before I did. And I could go to them and, hey, what are you growing? What do you see that works the best? And they're more than willing to share it, because I say we're really not in competition with each other. We're in competition with ourselves, because, whether it's viticulture, whether it's, winemaking, the analogy part of it. I mean, we're all going to add our little twists and nuances to things. So, we just try to encourage and support each other. And that's just not with information. That's even with equipment. Somebody's crusher distemmer went down a couple of weeks ago. I had an extra one. So I'm like, hey, use mine. I mean, why not help out our friends? I mean, this is a community. That's what we would do for neighbors. And that's what we're trying to build down here, is a community. And I think that's when people come down here, they appreciate hearing that, because there's so much division in the world when they see rural America getting together, even from all these diverse backgrounds and working together. That's gives them a sense of hope where humanity is going.
I totally agree. When I was down there and visiting you guys, I definitely got that sense of this is a community. You're all rooting for each other. And I think that was surprising to me. You wouldn't anticipate walking into a wine scene like that and everybody gets along and everyone wants to, you think, oh, aren't you competing with that guy, for sales?
Right.
And you guys don't see it that way. And I think it really is a beautiful statement about the Arizona wine scene, but also just a testament to you guys and to the community that you're building.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And we all have favorites, and somebody says, hey, what would you recommend? I mean, nobody around us makes bad wine. It might be made in a different style that I don't prefer, but there's always a wine someplace like, I get on kicks. I don't know about you, but I'm like, I get on a Tempranillo kick. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just geeking out about Tempranillo.
Yeah.
And then, I have my Tempranillo mentor, which is Mark Jarve over at Sapara. And if somebody really likes my Tempranillo, I'm like, hey, if you like this one, go try my favorite, which is over at Sapara. And they're like, who are you? What are you talking about? I'm like, oh yeah, we have our favorites in different places. Yeah. Yeah. So again, I still geek out about, different wines at different places and stuff. So.
Okay. As an insider, what's an underrated wine that people listening or watching this should go check out that they may be totally unaware of?
Okay. I'll describe what I believe is the underrated wine and the reason why it is. Okay. First of all, this might blow some people's minds out there. And I have never been really a big proponent of this wine, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's rosé. Okay. I was not a rosé drinker. I was like,
you as a rosé.
That is your grandma's wine, man. What are you talking about? But some of the rosé that is coming out of Arizona, it's authentic rosés. So what they're doing is they're basically taking, we do a lot of this here and it's really catching on. And it's kind of more of a seasonal thing, right? Like typically I'm not going to, drink rosé and when we're smoking a cigar, what I mean? It'd be a pairing kind of deal but we take, a couple tons of Malbec or Petit Verdot or Petit Syrah, we crush and destem it. And then we use this technique called saigner, which in French means bleed. So, typically a ton, 2,000 pounds of grapes will give you between 150 and 160 gallons of finished wine. But what we'll do is we'll crush and destem those grapes. We'll saigner some of that juice off, and we'll put that juice either in a stainless steel container or a neutral red barrel, and we'll we'll make that wine in a white wine style, even though it came from a red grape. So it'll pull some of the nuances from the red wine out. So it's not like this convoluted, like, oh, rosé, what is that? Oh, it's white wine, and somebody threw a dash of red wine into it to color it up. So we've been experimenting a lot with rosés. We've made some crazy ones. Graciano, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's new and exciting. Obviously, our big reds, I love our big, bold reds that we do in Arizona, but I think this is something that people should look at on the radar and don't poo-poo like I first did, because I was like, oh, a rosé, what the heck? People would come up to me. It's like, what is a rosé anyhow? It's like, well, let me tell you, But now it's starting to catch on, and that's the great thing about Arizona wine. It is like the Wild West, and it adds to our a tasting menu, a portfolio. So oftentimes in your taste room, you have your white drinkers and you have your red drinkers, and you try to bridge that gap in your wine menu, your tasting menu, and that's what rosé will do. You could have a couple dry rosés, and they're so fruit forward, people would swear there's sugar left in that wine, but they're not. So it's definitely something to be looking forward to.
I'll be honest, that is not where I thought you would go with that question.
I know.
I like it. All right. On that note, it's time for a drink break. All right. I like doing podcasts when you get to drink wine. Chad, when I have the drink break, I like to ask people, give us a snapshot, one of the best wine moments you've ever had in your life. Great people in wine know, like, there's just these moments where everything clicks, the stars align, the wine hits perfectly. Just, you probably have lots. Pick one. What's this one story you think of like, that moment when I had that wine in that setting was perfection? What was it?
98 Beaujolais.
Okay. What was the setting?
So the setting is I was at ASU. Okay. I was in my late 20s. I really wasn't a wine drinker. And at the time I was dating this gal who, liked her buttery oaky Chardonnay. And I had a buddy of mine that bought some bulk wine. And when I say bulk wine, like bulk bottles, so mixed cases of stuff. And he's like, hey, I have a whole bunch of this wine. It's really good wine, but I kind of bought broken cases. If you guys want to come through and look through them, I'll sell them to you for like $5 a bottle. And I was like, okay. So at the time, I really didn't know much about wine. And so I brought my girlfriend at the time, and I said, hey, let's go through here and take a look at some stuff and see if there's anything we want to buy. And she's like, ooh, Beaujolais. This stuff is really good. And I was like, okay, whatever, honey, one of those kind of things. And, we bought 4 or 5 bottles, and then, sat on it for a little bit, opened up a bottle, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? It was just magical. It was like, poof, like, this is what wine is.
Yeah.
Before then, I really didn't have an experience. Either I had drank poor wine, or it just wasn't my thing, or my palate wasn't maybe sophisticated enough, which I don't think that's it. But it's just the right time at the right place that all the stars aligned, and I went, this is crazy. This is crazy. And that's what really got me kind of wrapped up into the whole wine thing.
Oh, I love that. And I love the way you describe that. And, so much of what we do is trying to help people have those moments where they have that glass that it clicks. And I love when, I was at a wine tasting this summer with some friends, and, one of our friends said, I haven't really understood all your obsession with wine until right now. And we were having this one tasting, we were doing a vertical, and it finally clicked. And I just love those moments. I love hearing other people's moments when it's like, whoa, this is amazing. Because I love a good, Dr. Pepper, but I don't have the same reaction, right, that I do with, you get that right glass of wine in the right setting. I think that's so cool. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. We mentioned earlier that you and I met at church. and met you and your wife there. And you guys were very involved serving and, kind of like hardcore volunteers. And I was on staff. What's been your journey with Jesus? Just kind of give us the story of how did you come to faith and what does that look like for you?
Okay. Well, gosh, it's kind of crazy. I was raised like always, I guess since I was in fourth grade, going to church, going to Sunday school, going to youth group. It wasn't until I think like a lot of us in my early 20s where I always felt like I walked with God, but I didn't really know God all that well. And it wasn't until my probably late 20s that, mid to late 20s that I really, there were some things that happened in my life that oftentimes you don't know what's going on at the time until after it happens. And then you look back and then God's hand was all over it. And, I had some tragedies in my life and I didn't look at it as, being mad at God. I saw God written all over it and he took care of me and my family. And then the more I served, the closer I got to him. I don't know about you, Jeremy, especially some of the sermons that you write. Often those sermons are not for other people. They're for you.
Yeah, totally.
As you're doing this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And so as I'm, in youth ministry and I'm describing the walk I'm having and pursuing God and how he's revealing himself in my life through scripture and other people. Again, it's just, he just built on that and continued to build on it. It's kind of funny in like youth ministry and children's ministry would say, it's like, especially children's ministry, we kind of go through, and I actually have children's ministry tonight. And I'm like, hey, this is how we show our neighbor how we love them is we show respect for them, right? I mean, we don't have to say, oh, I love you, but we say, it's like, don't interrupt your neighbor, look out, put your neighbor's needs in front of your own. And God speaks through all people if our ears and eyes and hearts are open. And so through these, things with youth ministry and children's ministry and people around us, don't interrupt God, listen for him and he'll guide you. And he speaks through all these things, including scripture. So over the years, I've had, mentors, spiritual mentors that, people you've known if I mention them by name. And, the longer I live, the more I realize it's not about me. That's why my identity is not as a winemaker. My identity is a Christian, that I'm a tool in God's toolbox. And as long as I continue to be utilizable and my toolbox is open and I'm willing to swing that hammer or be utilized, he's going to use me. And so I think that's why, we have a lot of friends and relationships outside of the wine industry because and then even what we do is a little bit different here in the wine industry is that we try to encourage people to go on this journey with us. This isn't our journey as in Chad and Monica's journey or Cochise Wine Company's. This is our journey as Arizona. So, when people say, oh, I want to start a vineyard. I'm like, if you like wine, join a wine club. Vineyard's just a lot of work and a lot of money. But if you want to go on a journey with us, we'd be happy to have you out to bottle and harvest and press and prune and everything else. But it's not just ours, it's everybody's, because if it wasn't for the people supporting us, we wouldn't be where we're at. And again, just God surrounding us with wise counsel and people that are smarter than we are and better winemakers and better viticulturists. Everything I know, I contribute to somebody else because even the grapes, God's the one who raises the sun every morning and provides the soil and the water and the nutrients and things like that. I just try not to screw it up as a winemaker.
I love that perspective because you talk about, I see God in scripture in some of the normal ways, but you also just talk about your natural experiences as a winemaker, seeing God in all of that. And I love that, so often we put God, like God, you go visit God on Sundays at church, that's when you go, it's like, no, whatever you do, you need to learn to see God in that. What are some ways, you've mentioned this in this conversation, but what are some practical ways as someone, who spends most of his days around vines and and the growing and all of that you just see like, wow, that's God in that, or that has shaped your faith compared to someone who doesn't have, the same job you have?
I literally, I mean, my gosh, there's so many challenges that we have, whether that's in the field or in the winery. There's, so many miracles every day that it's often not what you know that gets you in trouble. It's what you don't know. And sometimes you just feel a tug in your heart, like, hey, maybe you should move. You should do this way. Or, hey, this person is in your life for a reason. Why don't you consult with him and see what they have to say? And again, my gosh, I'll tell you a quick story. So friends of ours, we have this program called Harvest Toast. I think I told you the story, right? Where we have, it saved our bacon during COVID, right? So COVID basically shut us down for like 6 weeks. And somebody said, hey, have you looked at this program called Harvest Toast? And that's where people buy, they have RVs and they come camping at your place. And, they don't, you don't charge for it. They just kind of buy your wares. I'm like, oh, it sounds like a great idea. And so during COVID, we signed up for this thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was the time you probably saw it where, everybody's buying RVs. Like if we're getting locked down, we're going to be locked down in an RV, traveling the country with our kids. Right. And so anyhow, we had, on average of a dozen RVs come through and stay at our vineyard a week. And it just, like I said, if it wasn't for that, this was just like, oh, I did this and it seemed like it worked. It was like a suggestion over there. And I was like, hey, why not? But it was God really telling us through this person, hey, do this. Right. And so we did it and we're obviously blessed by it. Not that we're rolling in money, but it kept the lights on. Right. And then through this, and I've said this to you before, we're really not in the business of wine. We're in the business of relationships, and the byproduct of our relationships are whatever we do. So we had 5 RVers that night, separate RVers. And I even have a picture of this. I might have showed it to you when you were down. And I was talking to these people, and I don't know, something just resonated about them, right? They're sitting on the patio. And if you're a Harvest host, you don't have to leave when the tasting room closes. And so we're having this conversation about, how crazy the world is. I'm like, yeah, but we're so blessed. We're having this conversation right now. And this goes to show that we shouldn't take any day for granted. And these people, they were probably early 60s, late 50s, right? And they looked like they were in good shape. The gal looked like a yoga instructor. The guy looked like he was a marathonist. These people looked like they, were keeping in good physical shape. And we had other people there that were kind of just kind of like me, like, hey, we had a few too many cheeseburgers or whatever, but we're enjoying life, right? And so Monica and I, my wife and I, my son went up and we're fixing dinner that night. And the RVs were all in the, pasture, overlooking the vineyard, watching the sunset. And somebody came running up and knocked on the door, which is very uncommon, and said, hey, somebody had a heart attack. And so we're like, oh my gosh. And so we called 911 because their cell phones or something didn't work. And, they were bringing somebody out. And then we ran down there and to see if we could help. Well, what do you think the chances are that somebody had a heart attack 20 miles from town, and the RV and the people next door, there was a EMT, a battalion chief, a retired nurse, and like a medic, and trailers surrounding them. And one of them actually heard the gasp, right? Like, oh my gosh. So, anyhow, we go down there, and I'm expecting to see, kind of like the middle-aged, had a Whopper and a beer kind of physique kind of guy, tipped over, and, no, it was the young yoga instructor, the young, beautiful, lady, super fit. She just tipped over in the trailer cooking dinner. And it was her husband that gasped. And then the trailer next door, they were cooking and their window was open, and she heard the gasp and she went, that's not good. And so she ran over there. Yep. She's in cardiac arrest, not breathing, no heartbeat, nothing. Right. And then started to perform CPR. what do you think the odds are that she had a defibrillator in her trailer? And she shocked her and brought her back. And, then, I mean, we were on the phone to the hospital, which is 25 miles away. And they were debating whether or not to send a helicopter and an ambulance. And they ended up sending an ambulance out. And they were talking to them. Obviously, everybody knew each other's credentials. And they said, yeah, we have her stabilized. Her, heart rate is this. Her pulse is this. And she had to be airlifted to Tucson Medical. But I got the privilege of driving the husband to the hospital here in Wilcox, and right before she boarded the helicopter. And she's like, oh, thank you so much for helping us out. And I said, you don't understand. A day before, a day after, you'd be dead. This was not a coincidence. This did not happen by accident. God put all these people in place for us to have this conversation, for us to pray. Okay. And so this all stemmed from a conversation 6 or 8 months previous about, hey, it might not be a bad idea to do this harvest toast thing. Because if they were someplace else, most likely she wouldn't be alive. So these are these little things that God sprinkles in our lives, that if we're listening, we're paying attention, we can be, tools in his toolbox to be able to pray with people and help guide them.
That is an amazing story. You shared that with me. I thought that was so cool. As you look at big picture, what do you think about Christianity these days?
I think it's being more relevant than it ever has. I think we went through the atheistic cycle, and now people, even in science, where growing up they had to teach evolution. Well, evolution is so unreasonable now that even the scientists are saying, no, there has to be intelligent design. Well, if there's intelligent design, what are we really saying? There has to be a prime mover, as Aristotle said. There's got to be somebody to put things in motion, because motion doesn't come from emotion, as in non-motion.
Right.
And so I think people are really starting to realize there is a God, but who is the God? And I think as the craziness continues in our lives, that people will be looking for answers, and that Christians will become more and more relevant. When I say Christians, I'm talking about followers of Jesus Christ, not by title. This isn't about religion. Religion is a form of self-salvation, but this is about a relationship with God. And it's kind of funny. I'm going to talk on faith tonight. What faith really is. And I use the analogy of, like, if somebody said, "I can prove to you, I can lay everything out that says this is not real." But yet, if I have a relationship with God and He's active in my life, and He's actually talking to me and directing me, it doesn't matter what they put in front of me. It is not real. It's deception. God is real. The relationship is real. And I think that's what people are yearning for. And I think that's why, that's what we're trying to do, is build relationships, because we're not supposed to be islands floating out there, just like sailboats, floundering in the sea. We're supposed to be connected, and people have lost that sense of connection. And we see that in the city. I mean, that's what we saw is, people would go to work, pull out of the garage, close the garage, go to work, come home, open the garage, close the garage, and you'd never see them. Mm-hmm. Where I think you've noticed driving in rural America, it's like everybody's waving. Everybody's waving. Do I know that person? Doesn't matter. Hey, man, how you doing? So I think that's what people are looking for, is that sense of community. You don't have to agree with everything that everybody agrees with, but you have to be tolerant. And that goes back to loving your neighbor, that no matter who it is, if they broke down, they had a flat tire, you're going to help them. And they know that you have their back and they have your back.
Yeah, that's great. What's something you're learning right now?
Patience. I must have prayed for it at some time, but I'm like, I tell people, don't pray for that. That's a rough one. Everything's in God's time, and it sounds so redundant and cliche, but even with what we're doing in viticulture, we have this, I try to have this order. Like I'm a very linear thinker, like a timeline. And I have things set out like, even like grape varietals when we need to harvest, it's like, oh, the whites come in first. We'll have Chardonnay, then Riesling, then Symphony, and then Pinotage and Tempranillo will be next. But then we do fruit samples, and I'm like, what the heck is Malbec ready for? It's like supposed to be 2 weeks, but again, everything is just on God's time, and enjoy the journey, not the destination. Because I think we get too, wrapped up into, this is where I am, this is where I have to go. And I think we see that even with people retiring. I've had, relatives close to me that are like, hey, when I retire, I'm going to do this. Like, don't wait till you retire. I mean, I get it if you're saving money to do something you really want to do, but my gosh, to put your life on hold, we don't know what tomorrow holds. I mean, Jesus could come back tonight or in a moment. So live life to the fullest, leave nothing on the board. I mean, say you love them every opportunity you get. It's just like, if you were to be here tomorrow, everybody would know where you would stand,
Yeah, I love that. My wife and I have definitely leaned into that. What's something you're excited about right now?
Right now, I think we're running on everything's exciting because, I mean, the big scope of things with all the fruit coming in. I'm kind of excited about this growing season, and it's kind of a conundrum because I might have described this to you. So, June was a really cool month here, so it slowed the grape growing down, right? Which is typically the hottest month. And then July was so hot, it stalled the grape growing. So what we ended up having is, grapes about 2/3 of the size of a normal grape. Okay. So it's about 1/3 smaller. And so what that means is we have more skin contact than we do juice normally. So what I think is going to happen, and maybe we should revisit this podcast in a year or two, right? So I think we're going to have bigger, bolder, chunkier red wine because we're going to have a lot more skin contact, and that's where a lot of most of the tannins and mouthfeel and things like that come from. And I think we're going to have more aromatic whites because, again, it's almost like when you make orange wine, that's where you ferment white wine in a red wine style. Yeah. And so it extracts more from the skins. I think we're going to have more skin to juice contact on the whites. So it's going to be an interesting growing year and winemaking year. Compared to last year, I think we're doing better because last year it was so wet. People were doing samples of their grapes thinking that they were further along than what they were, and they would bring them in, and the sugar content wasn't nearly as high. And then we'd have to try to, fiddle with things here at the winery. And I've always said, wine is made in the vineyard, not in the winery. Winery, we try to guide the wine along its journey and do what we need to do to get it from juice to wine, but not manipulate it too much to get it to where we want it to go. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So this might be related. What's a problem that you're trying to solve right now?
Right now, we're really keeping an eye on rot issues because of the monsoon. We're just trying to monitor them. We can get ahead of it as long as we're keeping an eye on things that are going on in the vineyard. And I think I have a pretty good nose, but like Desiree and my daughter Megan, who we all go out in the vineyard together, they can smell this stuff from a mile away. And they'll say, hey, I can smell this rot. We need to get this off. So even if it's not ready, we're better off pulling it early if it's got rot issues, especially if the viticulturist has done his preemptive spraying with like a copper fungicide or something like that to try to keep that rot from happening. Because every time it rains, it just washes off. So those are the kind of things we're most worried about at this time of year, is because you can't make good wine from bad wine grapes. I mean, there's things that we can kind of head off, using fungicides and things like that in the winery. But if it's already rotty, it's just going to, I mean, we've we've tried to save things like, hey, we'll try, but there's no guarantees. And yeah, it's wine, but it tastes terrible. So yeah, that's the wine you'll never see in a glass, where it's like we won't put our name on it or let anybody else put their name on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so where can people go if they're watching this, listening to this, and they're like, I like this guy? Where can they go to find out more about what you're doing?
Okay, we're on Facebook and Instagram. I'll give you a couple Facebooks. My personal one is just Chad Preston. And then we are at Birds and Barrels Vineyards on Facebook and Instagram. And then my Instagram is Chad Preston 16. And then website is Birds and Barrels Vineyards.com. And then I think we even have a couple of YouTubes up right now. So if you just YouTube Birds and Barrels Vineyards, you'll kind of see our facility. And I think we do some drone footage and stuff. So
look at you pulling out the drone footage.
Again, it's not me. It's the good people that I have around me.
That's awesome. Well, Chad, anything you want to add that we didn't get to tackle?
Yeah, I'd say also check out Wilcox Wine Country. We're having a wine festival down here third week in October. I'd like to come down. It's about 3 hours from Metro Phoenix area. There's camping, hotels, restaurants, and stuff like that. We're doing a lot of stuff up in the valley with the wine festivals this fall and winter, which I hope you and I can participate in. I think the last one I had to pull off, and you did. I was with Monica. I was bummed. I'm sorry. I was so looking forward to that. Pouring wine at wine festivals and talking to people is like, this is not even work. This is just slinging wine and talking and building relationships, and that's what we're all about.
I got to spend a day pouring wine with your crew, and people are there. They paid to get however many tickets, different pours, and I'm just pouring wine and loving the experience and loving getting to show them the incredible stuff you guys have produced. And people will be like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm at a wine festival pouring wine all day. Like, how could you not be doing good? Like, this is fun. Everybody's in a good mood. It's just like enjoying great wine, learning stuff. So yeah. Well, Chad, I just want to say, number one, thank you for your time. I know that literally he's texted me beforehand, figuring out, what he's got to do this morning with the grapes before joining the podcast. And your time is very valuable. I really appreciate it. It has been a joy to watch you and Monica and your journey and the faith and courage and just boldness you guys have displayed in living out your faith and living out your dreams. And it's been super encouraging for me to watch. I know a lot of other people feel the same way. And you guys are making incredible, incredible wine. And so it's just, I'm just proud to know you, man. It's awesome to see what you guys are doing. And I hope this podcast leads to even more people discovering the cool stuff that you guys are doing. So thank you for taking the time to do this today.
You bet. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, everybody. We'll catch you next time on the next Cabernet and Pray.
Thanks for joining us for Cabernet and Pray. We'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode or what you'd like to see more of in the future. You can email us at cheers@communionwineco.com. And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us online at communionwineco.com.